So I'm gonna be telling you a little bit of a story about my personal journey into understanding the importance of public engagement, and also how we've embedded that within the ADR UK programme that I lead. So it's all about opening up access to huge amounts of government data that's collected as a byproduct of the systems and services that government uses. Everything from courts records, education records, health records, census responses, and earnings and employment data as well. And we decided quite early on, but in a very kind of high-level way, that we should probably embed public engagement into everything we do. So in the pilot phase, this was done by kind of telling anyone that we commissioned that they really needed to think about public engagement. We didn't have a public engagement specialist in our team within ESRC that manages the whole programme at that stage. And this is the journey that we went on to convince me that absolutely we need to be owning that and taking that forward. And that's really what PEDRI came out of. And obviously, HDI UK are doing huge amounts of work on health data. Andrew Morris and I said right from the very start of our programmes that we really, really need to join up on anything we do on public engagement around data, because the public don't see these differences between different forms of data, and it's our job to translate that and make sense of that and talk about it in sensible ways with the public. So yes, we now do properly embed public engagement into everything we do, and we absolutely see the importance of it being a mutually beneficial in relationship. So it's not just a case of researchers rocking up and you know, sort of getting all of this information out of the brains of members of the public and then going away and never hearing anything about it. It has to be, we have to be accountable for that information. We have to be inclusive, and we also really, really want to be transparent about what we're doing. So the story I'm going to tell you is how we embedded public engagement into the Data First programme. So this is how we work with the Ministry of Justice, who were responsible for running all of the court services, criminal courts, family courts, all of the prison services in England and Wales, and we funded them to open up research access to that data. Now, at the very start of our programme, as I say, we said as a kind of footnote, if we're going to pay you to do this work, of course you'll have to embed some public engagement into what you do. To which their response was, you're joking, right? Because if you think about the users of the court services and the users of prisons, they couldn't naturally see a way that this was going to work, that they were going to have some meaningful engagement that was going to improve how they made decisions of that. So we supported them to do this, and we came up with the idea of them having a user representation panel. So this is people from the third sector organisations that work with both victims of crime and the perpetrators of crime to improve the justice system and improve the prison services. And spoiler alert, there's a podcast episode 2, that kind of gives you the full story to this. I'm just giving you the highlights. But yeah, so anyway, and at the very start of Ministry of Justice Data First programme, we had the judiciary, who were incredibly nervous about opening up access to this data. You had HMCTS, Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services, which were equally nervous, as well as senior leaders in MOJ. And we quite quickly realised that actually embedding public engagement, meaningful public engagement into everything we do was a way of kind of maintaining and building that social license to use this data. So yes, there were a lot of very, very nervous people, but by sense checking this with members of the public about how we're doing that, that was the way to build confidence in the full system and get everybody on board. So very happy for my slides to be shared, but just running through a few examples of the research fellows that we funded who were the sort of first users of a lot of this data. and how they found really creative ways with our funding to think about how to do meaningful public engagement. And so there's this incredible data set that they opened up for wider research use, and it's all within a secure research environment. So it's portal access to the data. You can't take anything out apart from the results of statistical tests. No data ever leaves the environment. But it's decades worth of education outcomes data from Department for Education linked to police national computer data. So anyone who's had a conviction or a caution out of this cohort of children, and that data is linked through. And it's been an incredibly powerful source of really, really rich insights about groups in society that frankly have been pretty underserved by researchers, quantitative researchers until now, because these data sets just haven't existed. We had one researcher, Hannah Dickinson, who developed a prospective statistical model using some education variables to see if it was possible to discriminate between different reoffending trajectories. And normally in the academic world, you'd do that, you'd analyse the data, and then you publish the paper, and then that would be it. Well, we actually paid her to kind of do the step of and now engage with some young people to see how they feel about this, and it fundamentally changed the direction of her research. And she did the engagement by going through a theatre company that engaged with groups of at-risk children. So it was a really, really sort of two-way interactive process that she went through to gain these views, and by all accounts it was very positive on all sides, and the young people really felt listened to. And similarly, Anna Leyland did some work on this same data set, and she's published a summary of her research findings on how children who have been involved with the care system have been received a criminal conviction or a caution. And again, there's a huge kind of gap in the evidence around how these children are supported or not by government systems and services, but really, really important work. And as part of the public engagement she did, actually a different organisation reached out to her, and they've ended up it's the Centre for Justice Innovation, and they've now done a joint publication that just came out last week on really, really joined up thinking about how to support these children much more practically, how government can support them and services. And another example, Alice Wickersham did some really, really insightful research on this data set, looking at different learning trajectories. So if you look at the orange line on that graph, that's falling educational attainment. So children coming into the system at the start of primary school with average educational attainment, and then it kind of falling off a cliff. So the middle of that graph is year 6, and the end of the graph is year 11. And so by the end of primary school, you know who these kids are, and by age 16, 1 in 3 of those pupils with a falling trajectory will have a conviction or a caution. That's quite a shocking statistic, and working out a way of talking about that didn't alienate the kids that are affected by this was incredibly important. And so Alice talked to kids about this, and that again changed how she presented this in her reports, which is incredibly important, because the last thing we want to do is alienate the very groups in society that we're trying to improve things for. And the outcome, well, we've got our showcase of the Data First programme with MOJ next week. And Sir Andrew McFarlane is one of the keynote speakers, President of the Family Division in the Court Services. The other keynote speaker is David Maguire, who's a director in the Prison Reform Trust, who sits on MOJ's user representation panel. And I say, if you want to know more about this journey, do have a listen to that ADR UK podcast episode. It's on all standard podcast providers, I've been assured, but it's a really, really positive journey, and there is absolutely no way we'd have got as far as a programme without properly embedding meaningful public engagement into everything we do. And if you really want the hard-nosed facts about it, we did an evaluation, commissioned an external evaluation of our programme at the end of last year, ahead of us submitting a business case for future funding. And it came back with this finding that for every £1 spent on ADR UK, there were just over £5 of benefits. So I would argue we couldn't have done that without public engagement. We couldn't have got the data owners on board, and we couldn't have kept the public on board. So yeah, a good news story for my personal journey into learning about the importance of public engagement and embedding it into the programme. Thank you very much.